You remember the day your universe ended. It did not end with a bang. It ended with a broadcast, a single galaxy-wide transmission. The voice of the Concordat filled every speaker. It was calm, impossibly calm. That was the most terrifying part. The speaker was a member of the Elder Ones, a being of pure thought and crystalline form. Its voice echoed without sound. It resonated directly inside your mind. You were in a cafe on Mars when it happened. The red dust swirled outside the dome. Everyone stopped what they were doing. The Edict of Exile was announced without ceremony. There was no trial. There was no appeal. Humanity was declared a cosmic plague. Our rapid expansion was called a disease. Our ambition was labeled a genetic flaw. Our very existence, a crime against the star science of the galaxy. They listed your supposed sins. You pushed too far. You grew too fast. You touched things meant to be left alone. They said you broke the unspoken rules of the cosmos. It was all nonsense, of course. You were simply successful. Your curiosity was a virtue, not a vice. The Concordats saw it differently. They were old. They were stagnant. They feared your dynamic energy. So they passed their judgment. Every human was now a fugitive. Every human ship was a target. There were no exceptions. There was no mercy. The broadcast ended. For a moment, there was silence. The clatter of a dropped fork echoed in the cafe. Then came the panic. The Concordat had fleets in every system. They were the law. They were the judge and the executioner. And they had just declared your entire species illegal. You were no longer a citizen of the galaxy. You were vermin to be cleansed. The great betrayal began moments later. Your alien neighbors, friends you shared meals with, turned on you. The authorities you respected became your hunters. The galaxy you called home became a death trap. Every port was closed. Every friendly face became a mask. You had to run. Your escape from the Sol system was a blur. You scrambled aboard a freighter, the Stardust Drifter. It was a piece of junk. Its engines coughed and sputtered. But it was fast enough. You saw Earth one last time, a beautiful blue marble hanging in the black. Then the Concordat blockade ships opened fire. Beams of angry light sliced through the darkness. They tore through civilian ships. They shattered transports filled with families. You saw explosions bloom like terrible flowers. There was no honor in their attack. They were exterminators. They were swatting insects from their perfect garden. You lived in the spaces between. You became a ghost in the machine of the galaxy. The Stardust Drifter became your world. Its recycled air was your atmosphere. Its nutrient paste was your daily bread. Not exactly a 5-star resort. But it kept you alive. You learned to navigate the dark lanes. These were forgotten pathways between star systems. They were dangerous and unpredictable. But they were empty. The Concordats' patrols were thorough. They scanned everything. They hunted with cold, relentless patience. So you learned to be invisible. Your ship was rigged for silence. You ran with every non-essential system powered down. The lights were off. The heat signature was a whisper. You drifted for weeks at a time, a cold metal tomb gliding through the void. The only sound was the thrum of your own heart. Sometimes you would see them. A Concordat patrol, a sleek predator ship. It would glide past your hiding spot. Its searchlights would sweep across your hull. In those moments, you did not breathe. You did not move. You were a statue carved from fear, waiting for the end. But the end never came. Your luck held. Or maybe your captain was just that good. Captain Ava Rostova, she was a former explorer. She knew the galaxy's secrets. She knew its hidden corners and dark alleys. She kept you and 50 other survivors safe. You lost track of time. Days blurred into weeks, weeks into months. The galaxy outside your viewport was a constant stream of hostile stars. You heard whispers on encrypted channels, stories of human colonies being wiped out, of brave last stands, and of utter, crushing defeat. Hope became a rationed commodity. You were always moving, always running. You never stayed in one system for more than a day. The Concordat had listening posts everywhere. They could hear a whisper from a light year away. To them, you were just another signal to be triangulated, another target to be eliminated. You learned to hate the stars. They were no longer beautiful points of light. They were the eyes of your enemy. They watched you with cold indifference. You longed for a planet, for solid ground beneath your feet, for a sky that did not try to kill you. Then, after years of running, you found it. A miracle in the unfathomable darkness. Captain Rostova found it. She followed a trail of stellar anomalies, a path so faint no Concordat chart would ever show it. It led to an uncharted system, a system with a single yellow sun and a single green and blue world. The planet had no official designation. It was a ghost on the star maps, a phantom world lost to time. When your ship broke through its clouds, you wept. You saw oceans. You saw continents. You saw a world that was alive, a world that was safe. You called it Haven. Haven was a paradise born from desperation. The air was clean and sweet. The water was pure. The gravity was a gentle embrace after years of artificial fields. You stepped onto its soil. You felt grass beneath your boots for the first time in forever. It was an impossible feeling. You were not the first to arrive. Other refugee ships had found their way here. A small community had already taken root. They were a collection of the lost and the broken, survivors from a dozen different worlds. They had built a small settlement in a sheltered valley. They called it Last Light. Life in Last Light was simple. It was hard work. You were building a new world from scratch. You farmed the native soil. You filtered the local water. You built homes from rock and timber. Every day was a struggle for survival. But it was a struggle you chose. You were not running anymore. The community was governed by a small council of elders. Captain Rostova became one of them. They made the rules. They settled disputes. They tried to build a society that was fair and just. It was a fragile dream, held together by shared trauma and a desperate need for peace. You found a role for yourself. You were a technician on the Stardust Drifter. Now you were one of the few who understood the old technology. You maintained the settlement's power grid. You kept the water purifiers running. You even fixed the occasional faulty toaster. It was a far cry from dodging starship patrols. The children born on Haven had never seen another world. They had never known the fear of the hunt. They played in the fields under the warm sun. They knew nothing of the Concordat. They did not know that their species was illegal. The elders decided it was better that way. Let them have a childhood free from shadows. But the shadows were always there. You saw them in the eyes of the other adults. You heard them in the hushed conversations at night. The fear never truly went away. It was a ghost that haunted your quiet paradise. You knew this peace was borrowed time. How long could a secret like Haven remain hidden? Every ship that arrived was decommissioned. Their parts were used for the settlement. Their engines were silenced forever. It was a strict rule: no transmissions, no signals of any kind. To the rest of the galaxy, this system did not exist. Its occupants were long dead. That was the price of your safety. Silence. You settled into a routine. The days were filled with work. The nights were quiet and peaceful. You would look up at the sky. The stars of this new galaxy were unfamiliar. They were not the constellations of Earth, but they were beautiful. And for the first time in a long time, you did not feel their cold judgment. You just felt a sense of wonder. Maybe, just maybe, this could be home. But peace is a fragile thing in a hostile universe. Your quiet existence was about to be shattered. It started with a whisper, a ghost from the past, a sound that should not exist. It came from the old communications array, the one you maintained. It was a derelict system, used only for monitoring local weather patterns. It was never meant to listen to the void. But you were always tinkering. You had boosted its sensitivity. Just a personal project to pass the time. You never expected to find anything. You were wrong. The signal was faint. So faint you almost missed it. It was buried under layers of stellar radiation. A tiny, rhythmic pulse. It was a pattern, not natural. It was a distress call, an old one. The protocol it used was ancient. It was a human protocol. Your blood ran cold. A human signal. Out here, in the middle of nowhere, it was impossible. Every human ship had been ordered to maintain absolute silence. To send a signal was to send a death sentence. It was a beacon for the Concordat, a big, bright sign that said, "We are here, come kill us." You isolated the signal. You cleaned it up. The audio was heavily degraded, full of static and noise. But through the hiss, you heard it. A voice. A human voice. It was speaking in Old Terran Standard, a language not widely used for 100 years. The message was on a loop. Just a few words, repeated over and over. Mayday. Mayday. This is the Starship Odyssey. We are in distress. Is anyone out there? Can anyone hear us? The voice was filled with a desperate, pleading tone. It was a ghost crying out in the dark. You ran a diagnostic. The signal was old. The energy decay suggested it had been broadcasting for decades, maybe even a century. It was an echo from a forgotten time, a time before the edict, before the fall. The real shock came when you triangulated the signal's origin. Your console beeped. A map of the local system appeared. A red dot blinked on the screen. It was not in orbit. It was not in the asteroid belt. The signal was coming from Haven, from the planet itself, from a location deep in the northern mountains, not more than 500 kilometers from your settlement. Your mind raced. A distress call from a ship named the Odyssey, broadcasting from somewhere on this planet. A ship that must have crashed here long ago. A ship that nobody knew existed. This changed everything. This changed the story of Haven. You were not the first. You took your findings to the council, to Elder Rostova. She listened with a grim expression. The other elders were shocked. Some were afraid. A signal, broadcasting from their own world. If you could detect it, even with your boosted array, could the Concordat? It was a risk you could not afford. The debate was heated. Elder Gon, a cautious man, argued for silence. "We must destroy the source," he said. "Find this ship and silence its beacon forever. Our survival depends on our secrecy." He was right, of course. It was the logical, sensible thing to do. But Elder Rostova disagreed. "This is a piece of our history," she argued. "A ship from before the fall, the Odyssey. I know that name. It was a legend, an exploration vessel from the Golden Age. It was declared lost over a century ago. To find it now, it is a miracle." you found yourself agreeing with Rostova. This was more than just a risk. It was an opportunity, a chance to reclaim a piece of your lost heritage, a connection to the past you thought was gone forever. The voice on that recording was your ancestor, a fellow human crying out for help, even if it was a century too late. The council was divided, fear versus curiosity, safety versus history. They argued for hours. Finally, you spoke up. The signal is weak, you said. It is directional, pointed away from the main star lanes. The odds of the Concordat finding it are small, but the odds of us learning something from it are huge. Your words seemed to turn the tide. A small expedition was approved, a team of 3. You, because you found the signal. A geologist named Aris, who knew the mountains. And a security officer named Jorik, just in case. Your mission was simple. Find the source of the signal, assess the situation, and report back. Under no circumstances were you to disable the beacon until the council gave the order. The journey north was arduous. You used an old ground rover. It rattled and shook over the rocky terrain. The northern mountains of Haven were jagged and imposing. They clawed at the sky like the fingers of a sleeping giant. The landscape was wild and untouched. You felt like an explorer on a new frontier, even though you were just a few hundred clicks from home. Aris navigated with expert skill. He followed the contours of the land. He pointed out strange rock formations. He talked about the planet's history, its volcanic past, its long ice ages. It was a world with its own story, a story you were now a part of. Jorik was silent for most of the trip. His hand never strayed far from his pulse rifle. Old habits die hard. After 2 days of travel, your handheld detector began to scream. The signal was strong. You were close. But there was nothing to see. Just a sheer cliff face, a wall of solid rock reaching up to the clouds. There was no ship. There was no crash site. Just a dead end. You were confused. The signal is coming from right here, you said, tapping your detector. The source is on the other side of this rock. Aris ran his hands over the cliff face. His brow was furrowed in concentration. This is not a natural formation, he said. Look at the strata. The lines are too perfect, too clean. He knocked on the rock. It made a strange, hollow sound, a deep, resonant boom that echoed in the thin mountain air. Jorik raised his rifle. What does that mean? He asked. It means, Aris said with a grin, that this is not a cliff. It is a door. He was right. After an hour of searching, you found it. A nearly invisible seam in the rock, a faint outline of a massive rectangular shape. There was a small, weathered panel next to it. It was covered in dust and grime. You wiped it clean. Beneath the dirt you saw a symbol, a stylized bird with its wings spread wide, the insignia of the pre-Concordat Terran fleet. Your heart pounded in your chest. This was it, the entrance to a hidden base or a tomb. You worked on the panel? The technology was ancient, but familiar. The principles were the same. You managed to bypass the security lock. You rerouted the auxiliary power. There was a low groan from deep within the mountain, a grinding of old, long-dormant machinery. With a shudder that shook the ground, the giant stone door began to retract. It slid sideways into the mountain. It revealed a vast, dark opening, a cavern of impossible size. A wave of cold, stale air washed over you. It smelled of ozone and old metal. And something else. Something electric, the smell of power. You ignited your shoulder lamps. 3 beams of light cut through the darkness. They illuminated a colossal space, The cavern was clearly artificial. The walls were smooth and reinforced. Gantries and catwalks crisscrossed the darkness above you. But it was what the cavern held that stole your breath. It was a ship, a starship. But it was unlike any ship you had ever seen. It was not a freighter. It was not an explorer. It was a warship, a massive, angular beast of a vessel. Its hull was a dark, non-reflective metal. It was bristling with weapon emplacements. It was a predator designed for one purpose: to fight and to win. The ship was docked in the center of the cavern. It was connected by umbilicals and power conduits. It was in pristine condition, as if it had been parked here yesterday, not a century ago. On its bow, in faded white letters, was a name that sent a shiver down your spine. Legacy? This was not the Odyssey. The distress call was a lie, a lure. This was something else entirely. This was a secret buried deep inside a forgotten world. This was a weapon waiting for a hand to wield it. You walked towards it in a state of shock. The scale of it was overwhelming. It was larger than any ship in your refugee fleet. It was probably larger than any single Concordat patrol ship. This was a capital-class vessel, a ghost from a war you had only read about in history files. Jorik let out a low whistle. "By the stars," he whispered. "What is this thing?" "It's our history," you replied, your voice full of awe. "It's a sword, and it's been waiting here for us." You looked at the massive ship, the Legacy, a relic of a time when humanity was not a plague, a time when you were a power in the galaxy, a power to be respected and feared. You realized the truth. The distress call was not a cry for help. It was a key, a test, a message sent out into the void, waiting for the right people to find it. People who still understood the old protocols. People who were desperate enough to follow a ghost's call. It was a message for you. For the first time since the edict, you felt a flicker of something you had long forgotten. It was not hope. It was something sharper, something more dangerous. You felt a surge of defiance. The Concordat had branded you illegal. They had hunted you. They had tried to erase you. They thought they had succeeded. They thought you were broken. Scared refugees hiding in the dark, they had no idea. They had no idea what was sleeping beneath the mountains of a forgotten world. They had no idea about the legacy you had just found. A silent promise of retribution, sleeping, waiting, until now. Your days of running were over. A new day was about to begin.